Talking about airports and all the things pertaining to airports, we needed to get rid of the 800-pound gorilla first. So land acquisition is obviously one of the stickiest issues when it comes to this project. But another one of the issues that comes up frequently is, can Caldwell even afford to operate an airport, period? Is that even possible? Because airports are sure expensive. And so what we did is we looked around a bit and we talked with some of the other managers in other parts of the country, other areas, to see what some of their solutions were. And here right in our own backyard, we discovered that the Deer Park Airport, which actually is a larger facility, has 2 runways instead of the one that Caldwell has proposed. Penny Loomis has been managing the Deer Park Airport here for several years, and we thought if we wanted to know what it took to manage and operate an airport, the best person to answer that is someone who's done it. So I'd like to introduce Penny Loomis from Deer Park.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming today. My slides aren't very big. They're, as much as anything, they're a cue for me as for speaking to you. But I have been managing the Deer Park Airport for, this is my 19th year. And at this point, and for at least since 1999, I believe it is, the city of Deer Park has not had to support the airport financially in any way, shape, or form. Now, I'm showing you a picture here from Google Earth of our airport. It was built during World War II, and it was built according to the one-size-fits-all type of plan, built quickly during the war effort. So we ended up with 3 huge runways, and of course we can't maintain that much. So we're down now to having 2 runways. The north-south runway is over 6,000 feet long. The northeast-southwest runway is about half of that, 3,200 feet. We have at our airport, go over here to my next slide if I can get to it here. That's not the one I wanted. We have over 100. Just slightly over 100 aircraft based at our airport. We have 7 businesses that are aviation related, and there are 5 that are aviation related, 2 that are not aviation related, so they're on parts of the airport that don't need the runways. We have trying to think what other, we have 1,800 acres, and I'm sure that's larger than will be the case when and if your airport is chosen here. And I don't really know why we end up with so much, but we have a lot of property there, and that can be an advantage and a disadvantage, because when you have a lot of property, it tends to be sitting there and somebody thinks, well, we could do such and such with that, and it's just the airport, so we'll just move this in there. Well, these kinds of things are exactly what happens to airports and makes them not self-sufficient, is when airport sponsors don't pay very strict attention to the first item on this list here, which is the federal regulations on airport revenue and land use. When you accept the federal funds for an airport, you also accept grant assurances. And those grant assurances are designed in many ways. Well, they're designed to protect the airport for sure, and they also are designed to help the airport be as self-sustaining as possible. In 1999, in the Federal Register, they published guidelines for what can and cannot be done with revenues and land uses at the airport. Any revenue that is generated at an airport must remain with the airport. And that was one of the very first things that I tackled when I took on the job at Deer Park Airport. It's very important that all revenues, such as lease revenues or fuel sales or any miscellaneous revenues that are generated there, need to be in a separate fund that are designated for the airport. That way you know really what is the true revenue stream for the airport. Land use is another big issue. As I mentioned, sometimes airport sponsors, whether it's a city or a county or whatever, we'll see a piece of property sitting out there by the runway that's not being used for something right now, and they think, well, we could really store our graders out there when we're not using it, or, we need a shop out there for the city. Well, that is really not consistent with the federal guidelines unless the airport is compensated at fair market value for those uses. We have several activities going on at our airport that are not aviation related, but we are compensated for them. In the 1980s, the city decided to use some of the open ground out there to grow alfalfa with municipal wastewater. Now, they probably would not be able to get that past the FAA these days because of wildlife issues, but in the 1980s they did. So the airport is compensated for the use of that ground. We have other activities. So I showed you several runways that are not in use, or not several runways, but big portions of runways that are not in use. And so we are able to utilize some of those pieces of property for non-aviation uses. As a matter of fact, your police here in Colville and the Sheriff's Department in Stevens County come to Deer Park Airport to do their driver training. They have a ball. That's probably, I think that's one of some of their favorite training, probably. Anyway, they come down and they bump each other and do 183 turns and so forth. So anyway, that all goes on at our airport. Now, these are not things that you could probably do at an airport that is brand spanking new and you weren't planning for these kinds of things, but it does mean that you can look at some alternatives that, as long as the airport is compensated at fair market value and it does not hamper or interfere with aviation activities, that some of these other kinds of things can go on. Farming is one of them. And Walla Walla Airport has a substantial revenue stream from wheat growing on airport property. So these kinds of things are allowable, but they must be compatible with aviation and they must be compensated for to the airport. Okay, we've done all that. The sources of revenue that we enjoy at Deer Park are land leases, which make up about 53% of our revenue stream. We sell fuel, both aviation gasoline and Jet A. We have the non-aviation uses that I just described to you, and we have a very small portion of administrative fees to people who pay their rents late and so on and so forth. I'll go back and just touch on these a little bit. The leases, it is common at airports to lease the ground for private individuals to build hangars. There are some airports that choose instead, in order to generate a greater revenue stream, the airport will actually build hangars and then lease the hangars out to the aircraft owners. My airport did not start that way back in the 70s when hangars were starting to be built there, so we followed on with just leasing the ground. So we do have to, though, keep in mind when we're preparing those leases and trying to stay self-sufficient that we're charging a reasonable amount. Now, what we consider reasonable on this side of the state is way different than the other side of the state. Way, way, way different. And I'm thankful for that. I'm a hangar owner and aircraft owner, so I'm very thankful for that. But on the other hand, we do need to stay consistent and competitive with the airports in our region. So I usually try to compare with Coeur d'Alene or Phelps Field and Spokane, trying to make sure that we are reasonable, because there are some airports that have shot themselves in the foot, frankly, by way undercharging for land leases and hangar leases. It needs to be a reasonable amount and something competitive with the others in the area. Fuel sales, we sell aviation fuel on a self-service basis, and depending on the fire season, and I know you are all very cognizant of the impact of the fire season here in Colville, we may sell anywhere from 25,000 gallons of aviation fuel up to 80,000. Some of the tankers that come in the summertime are gasoline hogs. I mean, they really can consume a lot, but the only reason they do that is because they're out putting out fires. So the other fuel sales we have are jet fuel sales. I started selling jet fuel about 5 years ago, and a good portion of our jet fuel sales, I hate to admit this, but when you have an airport here and you start selling jet fuel, many of my jet fuel sales are going to come here because a big portion of them are for fire season. And the helicopters that are based here in Colville, they're nurse truck drivers drive 50 miles one way early in the morning. They meet me at the airport at 6 o'clock, fill up their tanks, and then drive back to Colville so that they're ready to be on duty with full tanks of fuel. So I hate to tell you all that, but that is the reality. You will have a ready source of it here then for those firefighters. The expenses at my airport, by the way, the main one here, 68% of them approximately are for management. It may seem like a huge amount, but I'll explain that to you a little bit later. I am a contract manager. I'm not an employee of the city. So I assume more of the risk, shall we say, in terms of cost. And that is part of the risk because I provide all of the labor between myself and several part-time employees. We provide all the labor. My other expenses are fuel for, this is not purchasing fuel for resale, but fuel for the snow removal equipment and the mowers and the trucks and so on and so forth that we have. Professional expenses, you're going to have some legal issues come up, whether it's a lease that has to be attended to or whatever it might be. We do have some professional expenses, and so we have to pay an attorney for that sort of thing. Also, the auditor. The airport gets to pay a portion of the city's audit, so that's part of our professional expenses. Utilities, self-explanatory. Repair and maintenance of equipment. Our repair and maintenance of equipment can be rather high, and partly because we, as an airport that are federally funded, are eligible for surplus equipment. And that surplus equipment is actually free, except for the cost of getting it to you and repairing and maintaining it. I've got the most interesting fleet of maintenance vehicles at Deer Park. We have probably some of you know the old 12E Caterpillar graders. Oh, he's shaking his head. I just got one of those. It's like brand new to us. Fortunately, I have an employee that knows how to operate the thing. I think they call them knuckle busters, right? Yeah. So we have that. We've got a dump truck. We've got a huge, monstrous auger, snow blower, rotary snow plow, another big snow plow, all surplus, but they do require maintenance, and so I do have to have a person that's knowledgeable about this older equipment and also have budgeted some money to make sure we can maintain them. Supplies, of course, are self-explanatory on that, but that's the breakdown of the expenses that I have, and the revenues so far generally they have always exceeded it. We usually end up our year with about $50,000 in the bank, ready to go for the first few months of the year, because it's a very seasonal business, very, very seasonal. So we need more money at the beginning of the year just to get us through until the flying season starts again. I have reserve accounts set aside for grant matching funds. The Federal Aviation Administration is a significant source of capital revenue for our airport, and we are responsible for only 5%. The FAA pays 95% of the cost of projects. We're responsible for 5%, and thankfully the Aviation Division shares that with us, so the airport becomes responsible for only 2.5% of the cost of the project. We are in the midst right now of a 3-phase project, which will, in the total, come to well over $2 million, probably $2.5 million.
Excuse me, could you say that over again? 5% of the
Okay, the FAA, the federal government, pays 95% of our capital projects. And then the state and the local entity share the remaining 5%. So we pay 2.5%, and the state has generally paid 2.5%. I've already mentioned about the equipment replacement. Oh, I have an equipment replacement fund also. Probably most of the municipalities that you've dealt with have set up these kinds of things, but it's very nice. We determine how soon am I going to have to replace that mower that I got from surplus? Well, maybe I'll be able to find a surplus